Okay, people, today we're still in 7.7, conducting World War II. And this lesson is going to be perspectives on the atomic bomb. Here's your first clue. What are we going to consider today, Mr. D? What are we going to learn about? Perspectives on the atomic bomb. So it's a class activity that considers, right. Okay, let's see if we can have a watch
this assignment?
and see.
Where's this assignment?
Mr. V.
Mr. D, we can't hear that. I don't know if we're supposed to.
Don't have to. Okay, so you just witnessed, audio or no audio, you can see the extent of the destructive nature of the atomic bomb. All right, and here's a real photograph of that atomic bomb from the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the atomic bomb. They circled the mushroom cloud after the atomic bomb was dropped and tried to survey damage. All right, so this is perspectives on the atomic bomb here. Once again, we're in topic 7.7, which means you would go to activity 7.7, and you'll see there's two there. Part 2, activity 2, 7.7. Similarities and differences in how governments used a variety of methods to conduct war, more specifically, the dropping of the atomic bomb. So the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, General Tojo ordered a surprise attack. Okay, so Japanese airplanes bombed the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt told the nation that December 7th was a date which will live in infamy. Killed around 2,400 people, mostly military soldiers, some civilians. Okay, you can see some shots. These are some photographs. You can see the black areas on the map denote warships that were destroyed by Japan. 1,500 dead in Hawaii. Congress votes for war. This is an actual headline in the New York New World Telegram. Okay, you can see President Truman's speech on the war. The Japanese victories, as this happened, they invaded all of these areas in red in Asia, including all of the names of these islands in the Pacific. Okay? Japanese took the Philippines, the British colonies of Hong Kong, Burma, Malaysia, the Dutch East Indies, French Indonesia. The United States had economic ties to many of these areas. And that's one of the reasons why Japan bombed us first, because they knew by the time that we would rebuild our ships and come over to these islands, they would already be, for the lack of a military term, dug into these areas. It would be very difficult to remove them. Okay? The atomic bomb was used on August 6, 1945, killing at least 80,000 people. The estimates are vary, right? 120,000 more would die later from radiation sickness or burns. So 3 days later, the U.S. dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki after Japan refused to surrender after the first. After the second, excuse me, August 14th, 1945, Japan surrenders. So you can see Hiroshima and Nagasaki denoted in red on the map and where these bombs were dropped. You can see the death and destruction, the before picture on the left, the after on the right. You can see today, this is what it looks like in Hiroshima. This building was left as a memorial, a reminder of the impact of the atomic bomb. You can see ground zero. So the above map is the before, the below image is the after. Complete and total destruction. Annihilation. Somebody's shadow was vaporized and burnt into this wood wall framing. You can see that image. Okay, you can see the images reflecting complete annihilation. Here's the war memorial today. You can go there. Our students who traveled to Tokyo, Japan last year traveled to Hiroshima and went to these monuments to see. Japanese, this is an American perspective here, an American newspaper. Japanese surrender on the Allies' terms. And you can see the people in the image there. Okay, so you can see the tone of the image. Here's another one, the American headlines. This is American newspapers. You can see the tone after the dropping of the bomb, which ends the war. Okay? This is what you are going to consider today, the prompt. To what extent did the benefits of military technology outweigh the costs on the Pacific Front during World War II? This prompt infers the information, the historical context and developments we just looked at. Okay? So you have your images, you have your documents. You're going to use your documents and you're going to create groupings and a thesis. Document A, it's a debate of American political officials and the use of the atomic bomb. Some are like, absolutely. Others are like, okay, maybe, but there's a lot of negative that's going to happen over there, right? The purpose to reveal the American political perspectives, multiple, on dropping the atomic bomb. What's the point of view? It's various American points of view, for or against it. And the limitation, well, the source comes from an American history textbook. If you pick up a Japanese textbook in Japan, is it going to reveal this Western perspective that we have about ending the war and saving American lives? I don't think so. So that's the limitation on document A. Document A is the most difficult document because there's multiple perspectives, right? Opposed to using the bomb because it killed civilians indiscriminately. War is about killing military officials, right? Especially from the American perspective. All right. This is the most difficult one. So you have multiple perspectives, for and against. The limitations, an American perspective is an American textbook and its various viewpoints. Document B. Look at the subject. World War II soldier supports the atomic bomb, right? To inform the readers of the immorality of physical combat. This dude is almost like out of sight, out of mind. I've been there. I witnessed the death and destruction of hand-to-hand combat, shooting at each other. I'm tired of American lives dying. And he mentions Japanese soldiers died too. And he says war's immoral. It's the American perspective on the immorality of physical combat. But thank God for the atomic bomb, right? And the source, he favors the Americans, although he does mention a Japanese perspective. War is immoral. Japanese and American soldiers are dying, right? So what's the limitation? He acknowledges the immorality of war, but takes a pro-American perspective, limiting our understanding of the impact of the bomb on Japanese culture. So you can see that, document B. Document C. So don't get things twisted here. It says James Byron was one of Truman's advisors, but this is Leo Szilard's words after he met with Byron. So it's Leo Szilard's perspective or recollection of what James Byron said. So don't get it twisted, right? So it's his meeting with James Byron's political advisor to Truman, who pushes for use of the atomic bomb. You want to keep influence in Eurasia, American influence, right? And the purpose is to reveal Szilard's political position on the use of the atomic bomb. His point of view, well, he's an American scientist. Szilard is an American scientist. He's loyal to the American government. He reveals his recollection of James Byron's political position, which is pro-atomic bomb. What's the limitation? Well, this is a recollection of conversation that took place. Therefore, we don't know to what degree of accuracy Szilard's statements are. The pro-American perspective does not take into account the impact of the bomb on Japan. That's your second limitation there, right? So then when we look at the document D, you have a Japanese teenager, and he was the one in the video, the little boy who closes his eyes in the schoolroom. It's a true story. It's such a harrowing story about how this dude survives as a kid. Japanese teenagers' recollection of the impact of the atomic bomb, first-person recollection, to inform the reader of the negative impact, to a great extent, of the atomic bomb on Japan. And that's the purpose, to inform the reader. And the point of view is it's a Japanese teenage civilian, now works at Hiroshima's Peace Museum. So this dude wants to educate on the negative impact of the bomb, to remember the negative impact of the bomb, and to push and persuade people that this bomb always had a negative impact, right? You're working at a museum. It's to educate and remind people of something. The limitation, it doesn't consider the American perspective regarding the loss of life in the military, that American soldiers died too during this war, okay? And how many more American soldiers would have died if they invaded the mainland of Japan. So now let's go back and look at the yellow. It was my mistake because I left it up. I don't know if you found any clues here. So document A, look on the bottom in yellow. Benefits of military technology to a greater and lesser extent, because it's multiple points of view. So you can use document A as you will. Document B, look at the bottom in yellow. Benefits of military technology to a greater extent. Document C, look at the bottom. Benefits of military technology to a greater extent. Document D, benefits of military technology to a lesser extent from the Japanese perspective. Let's take a look at a sample thesis, and there could be many different. You could take the Japanese perspective or the American perspective, but the thesis that's guaranteed to get the point identifies and weighs all the perspectives. Remember what this entire lesson is about. Perspectives on the atomic bomb. You're weighing perspectives. So let's identify and weigh some perspectives. Take a look. For some, very important, for some, we're talking about the United States. For some, the benefits of military technology on the Pacific Front outweighed the costs to a greater extent during World War II. The reason for this is because while documents A and D reveal American political and Japanese civilian perspectives on the negative impact of the atomic bomb, I took a piece of A because it's multiple. And then I took D, which is all negative, and I have two negative perspectives here. The reason for this is because while documents A and D reveal American political and Japanese civilians' perspective on the negative impact of the atomic bomb, Now you have more documents for the positive. Documents A, B, and C reveal an American soldier, an American scientist, an American political advisor, and the American president of the United States, perspectives which all similarly support the significant benefits of dropping the atomic bomb. Perspectives on the atomic bomb. I mentioned all the perspectives. And when you look at these documents, you have some negative perspectives and more positive, beneficial perspectives of the use of military technology in dropping the bomb. And look at the perspectives they give you for to a greater extent, right? They start with the soldier, an average American soldier, his perspective, it's good. Then an American scientist building the bomb, it's good. Then you have various political advisors, it's good. And then you have the American president of the United States of America. It's good to a great extent. Drop that bomb, end the war, save American lives. Do you see that? To the lesser extent is the one perspective of the Japanese civilian and some smaller group of politicians that brought up the idea that it may have a negative impact on Japan. All right. We have 5 minutes left. Spokesman for Group 1. Although the atomic bomb usually caused mass destruction and outweighed the costs on the Pacific front during World War II because it aided the Allied forces to a great extent, you have to identify the perspectives. Okay? It's all about perspectives. Group 2, although there were many costs to military technology on the Pacific front during World War II, these documents show that the benefits outweigh the costs to a great extent. Okay, you made a historically defensible claim, an argument here. The reason for this is because documents A and D show the costs of military technology on this front, where documents A, B, and C show the benefits. That would get the point. When I create a sample thesis, I take it to the limit. I really take it to a far extent with all the details that I put in. But in the body of your essay, now you have 2 paragraphs. One paragraph, you got A and D, and the second paragraph, you got A, B, and C, which would show A, B, and C are to a greater extent. A and D are only to a lesser extent. Doesn't reveal enough negative perspectives there. This would get the point. Group 3, although the atomic bomb had caused mass death and destruction to home life in Japan, it benefited the Allies' powers, military, and helped bring World War II to an end, outweighing the costs of the Pacific front to a much greater extent. Okay, you made a historically defensible claim. The reason for this is because A, B, and C show the benefits of technology by showing the surrender of Russia and Japan. You don't have to mention this. You got to mention perspectives. While C shows the harmful effects of technology, you could say A and C because one politician, American politician, in document A says there's going to be a lot of death and destruction in Japan. Right? So they're weighing it. They're mentioning that there's a negative impact there. You can use A and C. Okay? Killing millions of people. The one thing that you all have to do is identify the perspectives. All right, last one. Although the use of military technology, specifically the atomic bomb, caused mass destruction on the Pacific front, the benefit of ending the war due to the atomic bomb outweighed the cost to a great extent. That is a historically defensible claim. The reason for this is because while document D describes the hardships of the bomb in Hiroshima, the benefits of the bomb described in documents A, B, and C, how the bomb ceased fighting from American point of view. Okay, from an American point of view, at least you identified there's a point of view here. Document D is from the Japanese point of view. You can put A and D as well. But this would get the point. You would separate those paragraphs and prove it. All right, we're getting better. We're getting better at this. So, real quick, what's essential to remember? Look at the outcomes of the global conflict. Most destructive war in history, 60 million deaths, Half the casualties were civilians. Blur the lines between civilian and military targets. Look at the atomic bomb, right? Thousands of town villages, industrial enterprises destroyed. The atomic bomb killed hundreds of thousands of lives, significantly short time, yet brought a swift end to the World War II on the Pacific front. And you can see, look at the casualties from the United States at the bottom, all the way up to poor Poland, who suffered the most casualties from the Holocaust at the top. Hope this helps.